what's not working?
Absolutely. It's your panel.
Well, it's just a frustration we have when the trade negotiators that your tax dollars pay to go off and do their job and bring home results, opening markets for corporations, but also creating benefits on South-South trade. The Doha round is stuck on that issue, as you know, in agriculture and services and industrial goods. But when we finish an agreement, when we talk to companies about AGOA and about our CAFTA and our other trade agreements, I frequently get the comment, we can't go in because the market's too small. So I challenge this issue of we will go in. U.S. corporations still have a short-term view when it comes to Rwanda. Rwanda is small, it is landlocked, but it's damn good, and it's getting better. Darn good, sorry, I apologize. It's getting better. And so when we have a bilateral conversation with Rwanda, the U.S. government has a structural problem. Steve, you asked me for institutional problems. We deal bilaterally. Yeah. But what will make Rwanda grow is a regional program.
That's correct.
We haven't figured out how to do that yet. In Central America, we worked with Walmart. I apologize to my AID colleagues, but Walmart came in and said, look, we want to build our suppliers as opposed to customers. What really works on this in the trade area, what I see as capacity building, is corporations and supplier development, where you connect the small businesses, not the micro businesses yet. There's a big focus on microfinance, but we need to move into the small businesses, and Grameen knows this probably better than anybody. What do you do with micros when they start getting into the small businesses? You need to connect them to these guys. And so we had a problem with Walmart. They wanted to do a regional program in Central America to train farmers, to give them access to capital, to raise their incomes, and our institutional structure in the U.S. government, MCC included, and AID, couldn't put together a regional partnering program with them. Those are the frustrations we face that don't work.
You know, the rigor mortis of the WTO and the Doha round, especially in our sector, has led to a proliferation of bilateral relationships. And it's interesting that businesses now, like us, we're getting in the middle of governments and assisting on bilateral relationships with regard to migration and labour standards and certification. Typical examples between the EU and Egypt right now. We're actually helping that negotiation. And it's because of exactly the structural failures that you mentioned. They're no one's fault, particularly, apart from the fact that we can't finish a darn negotiation anywhere. But we find in business we've got to get right in the middle of that, or else we're going to get a set of completely disconnected bilateral relationships globally.
I just wanted to add a comment on this, because I just had an idea that went back to what Daria said this morning. In terms of, and I think it's what we were alluding to before in getting private sector to invest in emerging markets, the same conditions that will enable stronger foreign direct investment are the conditions that will enable domestic investment. And that has to be there first.
Exactly.
So finding ways to create more economic actors in a country, and then working almost from the bottom up, as we're doing, as well as how the governments are working from the top down, to try and promote what are the conditions that are going to be critically important to support that development, to support that job growth or economic activity. It's fundamental, and we have to work on this from both sides in order for it to be effective.
Actually, that's a terrific point. I mean, and when you talk about, how are you going to incentivize corporations to go into some of these small markets? That's the only way you're going to do it. I mean, think of Microsoft. I mean, we really don't have large facilities anywhere. We have very small stuff all over the place. But we have partners in just about every single country. These are independent local businesses that develop technology on a platform. If the country is actually not encouraging that, it becomes incredibly hard for us to go and do anything there. Because the only way the business is going to thrive for us is that they thrive. And if they don't thrive, it becomes actually incredibly challenging for us to do that. So I think that it is very important that as discussions are had, even at the government levels, that there is some ways for local governments to understand that they have to create an incentive system for local companies to thrive first, before expecting an international or a multinational to actually come in and move into that marketplace, because it is just not going to happen. I'm going to come back to Arthur now and see that if he's actually ready to respond. And he needs a microphone, and while the microphone is coming, I'm actually going to, Karen, who's sitting there from Intel, I'm going to kind of call upon her next. So let's Arthur finish.
Yeah.
And I'll ask a different question to you, Karen.
I'm Arthur Rothkopf with the U.S. Chamber, and I'm responsible for the Chamber's education and workforce program. I didn't expect to be part of the panel, but Dr. thank you very much. Always good. I'd say, and we don't have the problem that we tend to focus at the Chamber primarily on U.S. workforce policies, and as we try to deal with the huge numbers of unemployed that we have in this country, one of the things we're trying to, one, develop best practices in workforce development. We're working closely with the administration on issues of how do we use our community colleges to develop, to really train and then retrain those workers who've been displaced. We also in this country have a workforce system, thing called workforce investment boards, so-called one-stops, which really don't work. And we have tried very hard. I know Microsoft has worked with those workforce boards to provide computers, because many of the people who are looking for jobs now are not computer literate. They can't really deal, you can't really get the job. You can't get a job at Walmart really unless you are computer literate. And Microsoft and Intel and other companies have taken the lead there. But we think that system needs to be totally redone, much more private sector driven than it is right now. When we talk about these overseas issues, the issues that David talks about, I think we really haven't focused a great deal on them, but I will say that our American Chambers of Commerce Abroad, the AmChams, are focusing on those, and Stephen keeps on meeting with them and talking with them. Many of them now have corporate social responsibility programs, and I think that's a critical element. There are about 100 AmChams around the world, and many of them are taking the lead on some of those workforce issues that David alluded to.
Just as an example, I'll become a member of your team for a second. I saw a fantastic example 2 weeks ago. I was in Mexico City. There's a new ambassador in Mexico City, of course. He invited the Mexican Chamber of Commerce, which I think is the second largest, certainly in the Americas. And they invited one of your members to come and talk about the migration and labor issues on the border, expanding the free trade zones, what's in it for business, and do the right thing, but what's in it for business. Your people were incredibly helpful in influencing both the view of the ambassador about what we should address to the Mexican government and on the Mexican Chamber of Commerce. So I think you're doing a great job.
Well, that's great, and that's the thing we need to do, and need to take that, because I think the AmChams, probably a third to a half of them are particularly active here, and I'm delighted to hear about what our AmCham in Mexico has done, but we need to spread that word, and that's part of what we at the Chamber are doing in collaboration with Stephen and BCLC.
Thank you.